All right, so next lot of questions. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good.
Yeah, you're good? Okay, cool.
Have a sip of my grapefruit soda here.
Oh, nice.
Mm,
Of my celery,
it's very
celery
refreshing.
juice. Yeah. Mm. Um, so these are more questions about your deployment.
Mhm.
Were you employed by the same name as Randy Cramer?
That was always my name. Yeah, I was never given another name. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Okay. Were you paid at all during your deployment?
That's part of the paperwork issue is there is
Yeah.
back pay that is owed to me. So
Mm.
no, we were supposed, all of the pay was supposed to go into a fund that we were supposed to get later, but that's a legal issue that we're sorting out. So yeah, I have back pay coming at some point.
Okay.
But we have to go through the paperwork process and through the right agencies to get the paperwork, to go to the Defense Department, to get them to stamp a piece of paper that says, oh, we messed up. And then they can
Right.
start issuing. Then they'll probably issue a settlement, meaning, there will be a calculation of how much they actually owe me. And someone will say, well, how about we give you this much? And we'll dicker
Right.
back and forth, and I'll probably agree on a settlement, which is fine. I'm okay with that. I don't need every dime that I ever earned, but there's a principle of the matter of being paid. So
Definitely. Otherwise, it's slave labor. Really.
yes, which yeah is one of the
Yeah.
problems. And
Yeah.
the command staff likes to address these issues by saying one of the reasons why we think that we need these things to be brought to public light and why we need exposure of these things is because that's a crime. And
Mm.
we don't think it's
Mm.
okay for
Mm.
certain people who are in control of the numbers of this game to be able to break the law, not pay people what they're owed, and do things that compromise people's legal sovereignty for them to do their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Exactly.
one among the things that we think needs to be fixed. And the only way these things get fixed is if you address them, bring sunshine to them, and get them talked about and exposed through the proper bureaucratic chains, which is also what
Mm.
we're attempting to do. We don't want people protesting, on the steps of Congress, because I don't think that that's going to get anything done.
Yeah.
We think going through the process to make sure that the departments within the DoD and the military are conducting themselves in a legal way that they are supposed to be. And if they're not, then, we'll make sure that they are through the filing of the proper paperwork.
Sure. So there's a group of you that are doing this together. Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Okay. Yeah.
It may take
Yeah.
a while to get that part done. In fact, based on sort of what's happening at the moment, it's more than likely that there's going to be another way that that's all going to get sorted out, probably before we get to that sort of paperwork level to be able to get that done. But I won't comment much more on that other to say that, there are other changes that may accelerate that process faster than our legal pursuits.
Okay. Okay.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. It's
That would be a good thing. So, yeah.
Mm. This is my question. Did they provide psychologists on the basis, given that it's quite traumatic and, the military here have psychologists? No.
Not usually. We had professionals, but most of the time, we didn't get to see them. People were really experiencing too much trauma, then they just give you a mind wipe. They block out the memories that are feeling traumatizing, or like really what most of the military does right now to soldiers who are having issues. They just give you pills or drugs and say, here, take this, and sort it out. But mostly it was just, we got told, suck it up, buttercup.
Wow.
And, you'll be fine. But to be fair, we're also
Yeah.
genetically engineered to be more resilient to those things. So
Right.
we deal with the trauma better than the average soldier, average civilian would, which is why we have
Okay.
to sort of tolerate so much of it. We're built for resiliency.
So what happens to the trauma then? does it get tucked away? Do you have to deal with it later? Is that what
Oh
you're
yeah.
dealing
Oh, I
with
had to deal with
now?
it later. That's for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, there was a time
yeah,
in my life when I had to spend a couple of decades,
yeah,
doing the healing process to get through the trauma so that I could function as a sort of normal human being again. So, oh yeah, there was at the end of my tour, there was quite a bit of sorting that out, once I was back here on planet. So, oh yeah, I just sorted out. Everyone does. I know people who are still sorting out their trauma issues, and will probably
yeah,
continue to do so for decades.
yeah. Wow. Mm. How did
Comes
this?
with the territory.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, I don't know, it's part of their responsibility to provide that. um, yeah, it's quite
I agree.
inhumane
This
not
is
to.
another reason why we think, it needs to be talked about so that the people who are suffering from their traumas can get support and get treatments and not just be left to their own devices, which is pretty much what happens.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bit sad.
I mean, suicide rate's high.
Yeah,
Suicide rate of soldiers is high in
uh-huh,
across the board. So
uh-huh.
naturally, people who serve in our branches also have high suicide rates.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Um, I think, yeah, this question we might have answered. How did the soldiers deal with the trauma of fighting, killing, and seeing their mates die over and over again? I guess you answered.
Mostly, like I said, yeah, when you're in the field, you tuck it and you deal with it later.
Yeah.
So, there's also a lot of fights, a lot of
Okay.
people. Oh yeah, a lot of people,
Yeah.
getting in fights in the hallways and in the barracks and stuff. So some of it was, taken out on each other too. Sometimes it's a little dysfunctional, but what are you gonna expect there, I guess. So.
Yeah. Okay. Did they ease you into getting used to the ET races?
The training process, which was when I was a child, there's definitely an acclimation process to what we call exotic environments. And
Mm.
exotic environments become weirder and weirder, and you're dealing with more challenging, either replicated or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure where all of the biological sources come from in training, but yeah, I mean, eventually in training, you're dealing with live fire practices against things that aren't human. You get used to it, you get acclimated to it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all happening when, we're young. And so it's not like full grown adults who sometimes the first time they see an ET species, they absolutely freak out. There have been some cases where the regular military has been called in to deal with events on planet Earth where there were extraterrestrial problems, let's just say,
Mm-hmm.
and it usually ends very, very badly. Those soldiers have a really hard time coping, and they have, really, really, really intense sort of reality shattering, kind of experiences with that. So it does way more damage to soldiers who are not prepared for it
Yeah.
than it does to us because we're acclimated to it when we're young. So by the first time you see, your first extraterrestrial in a combat zone, you're pretty ready for it. So I'm not saying it's still not shocking the first time,
Yeah.
but you're ready for it. So instead of curling up into a fetal position and crying,
Yeah.
you can still hold your rifle and still, do your job. And it just like everything else, it gets easier. So,
Yeah.
once it's
Right.
happened a dozen or 2 dozen times, that's just normal then. It's just you're normal.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there many females working there?
Um, the soldier ranks, it's about 2/3 male to about a third female.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there are, and quite a bit of them, but it's, like I said, about 2/3 to a third.
And what did the females, what were their roles mainly? Were they
Fighting right
fighting?
alongside with
Really?
us. Oh
Wow.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh. Were there relationships or pregnancies on the base?
No pregnancies, but relationships. Sure, that's how I met my first wife. So,
Oh, right. Wow. Did you miss Earth during your deployment?
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, you do. We have simulators.
Uh-huh.
And so sometimes when the simulate, mostly for training, the simulators used for training, but occasionally they are used for recreation. So, you know, I would take walks in the forest, walks on the beach in a simulator. So it was not exactly like being home again, but it was kind of like it. So, I mean, you sort of get that feeling like, oh, that was nice to walk on the beach when there's
Okay.
no beach anywhere near you. So
Oh,
it doesn't really make up for it, but it also makes it feel like you haven't gone years and years and years and years without seeing home, even though you have. Because the
okay.
simulator is pretty good. The simulators are pretty good. It seems pretty real. So,
Right. Wow. Is it 3D, 4D?
oh, it's you have to wear a headpiece.
Yes.
So it's you go into a virtual environment controlled by a computer that is, you know, all of your senses are experiencing what the computer program tells you.
Wow.
So it's very vivid. It's very real.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
again, it's why we use it for training, because you can do just about anything in a training simulator that you might have to do in real life and practice for it as if it were nearly real.
Okay.
So fighting an alien opponent in a simulator isn't quite the same as in real life, but it's close. Better than a
Yeah.
video game. So it's close. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess would you have the smell in the simulator?
Oh yeah. Oh
You do?
yeah.
Oh,
Oh
right.
yeah. You have all senses. All senses are,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. So what led you to do the psionics workshops?
Uh, listen, the first time that I was had the opportunity to teach a class, I asked my Brigadier General, like, well, I don't know, what should I teach on? He's like, well, what do you think people need to know? And I was like, people need to know how to master their own psionic abilities. I was like, okay, teach that. And I was like, what, you want me to teach from the psionics manual? And he was like, yeah, why not? I'm like, okay. So I wasn't thinking at first that that would be okay, but he completely approved. And so basically I teach my class pretty much from the psionics manual, the USMCSS psionics manual.
Wow. So you've got a copy of that?
No, I've taken the class so many times
Yeah.
that I
Right.
am well familiarized with it. I have a photographic memory, so
Okay.
it's up here, but no, I don't have an actual copy of it.
Yeah. Do you practice some of that yourself? The
Every
psionics?
day,
Yeah.
every day,
What are
every.
some things that you've done? What are some examples?
I'm reteaching myself telekinesis.
Okay.
Yeah, so
How's that going?
it's going. Yeah, I got to
Yeah.
build another trainer that has heavier objects in it. So right now we're using a trainer that has very, very lightweight objects in it in a near frictionless environment. So, you know, you can get some movement out of that, but I just got to train stronger muscles by using heavier and heavier objects so that I can start moving stuff around on the tabletop. So I give myself another 6 months, you know, and I should be able to juggle a billiard ball.
Really? Wow.
Mm.
What can you move at the moment?
Like I said, very small, lightweight objects that are about like toothpicks,
Tooth.
basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically
Well,
toothpicks.
that's good. That's pretty good. Better than nothing. I've been
Very
trying
lightweight
and I
objects.
can't.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
lightweight objects, but got to
Mm.
build the trainer so we can do heavier and heavier. It's a
Yeah.
muscle. It's just like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, you don't, you know, start with something that's, you know, small weight and move up and up and up, you never will develop it. So just like a muscle, you have to practice. You have to start with a manageable weight, whatever that is, and then, you know, keep doing that every day and then work up to heavier and heavier objects. So I've got toothpicks stacked up. So there's multiple toothpicks in a stack. So it's more than a single toothpick at a time, but, you know, still
Okay.
just toothpicks, little pieces of wood.
Has that got anything to do with using the chi energy to move it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. The next questions. It's more about recovering memories, and I guess it's I want to, get the message out there for anyone else that might be starting to recover memories and going through the trauma, to get some guidance. So I guess the first question is, what are the memories like? Like, how did you know they were memories rather than dreams or implants?
Because they were traumatizing. That was sort of the first clue, was that they were incredibly traumatizing and incredibly vivid. So what we find is that there is a certain amount of success that we have getting to people's memories by just normal hypnotherapy, which is really just someone else talking you down into an alpha theta state so that you can get into your subconscious and retrieve memories. Anyone who has a regular meditation practice can get down into their own alpha theta state and do their own, memory retrieval process, which is pretty much what I did. But it still takes some practice and can be better with some guidance. And there are plenty of people in the community who are good I know several friends who are good hypnotherapists who aren't going to tell you that you're crazy for remembering things that might have to do with extraterrestrials or military space programs. You just go to a hypnotherapist on the corner, that's going to help you quit smoking. They might not think that what you're experiencing is legit. And they might want to send you to a psychiatrist. So pick a careful hypnotherapist, someone who's in the field.
Yeah, I know a couple of people that have dreams that are very vivid, but they do seem traumatized and they don't even want to talk about the dreams. And
most people don't. Most people who come to me and talk about their experiences or what they're remembering, a lot of them, don't want to get much farther. They don't necessarily want to get into the memory retrieval process. And I think it's pretty standard when this sort of thing comes up to want to put, I wanted to push it right back down and go, oh, no, that's not happening. So I went through a whole denial process myself, not wanting to believe that this flood of memories and emotional experiences, were legitimate. I questioned my mental sanity and whether I was just having a crazy episode. And I went through a lot of personal denial and personal issues with it before I came to go through enough of it that I could feel confident that it was actually happening and that I could go, okay, I think this is actually happening now. But I want to point out, when I was doing this many, many years ago, there really wasn't anybody else. So it wasn't like there were people out there talking about their recovered memories from covert military space program activities. So there wasn't someone that I could go to and say, hey, how do I navigate this? That really, they didn't exist at that time. And I spent some time looking for those people, and they did not exist. They were not out there. They were not talking publicly. And so, there was not much support when I was attempting to do it. Now there's quite a bit more. So people who are going through that process, there's more people that are willing to be supportive, hypnotherapists and therapist professionals who are willing to go through the process because they've navigated it with some other people too. There are more people have gone through this. I know a bunch of people who have been through this process, have no desire to be public, have no desire to get their story out into the internet or do interviews. Most of them are doing it just so that they can function, in relationships and in their own personal lives. And most of them have no desire to do what I am doing in any way, shape, or form. So there's way more people out there who are going through this process than there are publicly talking about it. Way more. And I talk to these people all the time, and they don't want they don't want people to know. They don't want their friends and families to know still at this point. They're just sorting it out themselves. They don't want to, have that, they don't want to be that person. So, but there's a lot of people going through it, a lot. So the first thing that I would really want people to understand is that they're not alone in the process, and they're not alone going through this sort of thing. They're in pretty good company with a lot of other people who are going through the process and sorting stuff out.
Sure. And what got you through it all, because you were so isolated and alone? I can only imagine how terrible that would have been to not have to consult.
I mean, I struggled through it, to be honest with you. It was difficult some days. I certainly spent some time smoking and drinking and, you know, self-medicating with, you know, lots of tequila sometimes. Drinking was a coping mechanism. And I'm not saying that that should be people's coping mechanisms, because it wasn't really very healthy when I was doing it. But it did, you know, help through the process in its own way. And again, I'm not trying to suggest to people that, you know, to help them through the process, they should have a stiff drink or smoke a fat one. But people cope in different ways. And so, you know, I struggled through it and I coped in different ways. And as I got through the trauma and started to heal the trauma, then there were less symptomology. And when there's less symptomology, then there's less need for self-medicating. So.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And now there is more support, like you said.
Yeah, which helps too, that there's more support. Like, again, back when I was doing this, there was next to nobody. I was lucky enough to have a friend who was a psychiatrist who I spent some time talking with, and he knew someone in the field who was a therapist who was actually dealing with contactees, abductees. So she at least had some background, so that, you know, when I started talking to her, she wasn't completely surprised, and said to me one day, she was like, you know, I can't talk about my other clients. She said, but you're not the only person going through this. So she was dealing with a handful of clients that were having similar processes going through their own memory recovery process. So, but it was still very scant back in the day.
Well, thanks to you for bringing it out to the public. You've helped a lot of people just by doing that.
I hope so.
So that they're not crazy
definitely.
And to look for help. What are some of the signs and symptoms of the post-trauma that is different from normal post-trauma? Like, it's, you know, I guess I'm thinking for people, you know, to try and navigate as to whether they have been through this space program, secret space program.
It's kind of the same as other post-traumatic stress. It's just sometimes more intensified. So nightmares, night terrors, anxiety, depression, migraines, agoraphobia. I mean, there's, you know, can be a whole list of things depending on what a person's personal process about it is, and depending on what kind of trauma that they've had to survive through. So it's the same, and yet usually just sort of more magnified, but it's also unique to each individual person. Not everybody has the same symptomology.
Sure. Okay.
But, you know, if someone's having nightmares, night terrors, depression, anxiety, that's a good start, you know, that there's probably something under there that they might want to sort out and find out about.
And recurring nightmares with similar themes, like shooting ETs, or
sometimes it's also just, you know, swimming in an ocean of blood and body parts.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know, that was a common reoccurring nightmare for me, was just swimming in an ocean of blood and body parts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, not pleasant.
No, not at all. No, I would often wake up from those kinds of nightmares not able to go back to sleep. I'd have to turn all the lights on and, you know, sit up in a chair and just kind of shake through it sometimes.
Okay. Do you know whether there are many super soldiers in Australia?
There certainly are. I couldn't say how many. That's not for me to say, but we certainly have deployed personnel from all over the world, but probably the majority of people that I have encountered, we sort of think of as, you know, from the primary kind of G7, G8, G20 countries. So most of the Western civilized militaries are where we're pulling most of those resources and most of those people from. So there's been a few Aussies in there somewhere. Yeah.
And do you know the situation in Australia? Is there any updates you can share with us in terms of?
Not that I know personally that I would suggest about that, but again, just it's a thing. It happens. There are certainly going to be people in the larger Australian community who have these issues and will be recovering from the process for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't have numbers like a chart that says here's how many people have been deployed, that were Americans, Britons, Australians, Germans, French, Japanese. I don't have those charts or those numbers. Even if I did, I wouldn't be allowed to share them.
Okay.
Numbers like that would be classified. But so it's a thing. And I would suspect that in the overall population, you're talking about at least thousands and tens of thousands of people in a varying age groups who probably had experiences. Not all of them are going to want to remember. Not all of them are going to want to go through the process. Probably a good chunk of them, if they are having those experiences, having nightmares, night terrors, they're just going to drink and not tell anybody about it and not seek therapy and not get help. And which is what most people do, with their traumas anyway. They don't seek help and they just self-medicate and drink anyway. So
okay, I think part of that is because they don't really know what's going on with them. Like it's just seems so far out. Like even this subject is so
that certainly makes it worse. But I think ask a mental health professional how many people who are traumatized from child abuse actually seek help and actually sort it out. Most of them don't. Most of them don't get counseling. Most of them don't see doctors. Most of them take it out on other people and drink heavily. That's what, most people who suffer from, normal childhood traumas do. So, and service personnel are the same way. And so some people like this, it's going to be even more so that they're not going to want to tell anybody about it, but the coping mechanisms and the percentages are still going to be kind of the same. Only a certain percentage of people will actually have the willpower and the self analysis to go, I really got to sort this out. Most people will just ignore it and go, I got too many things to do. I got to get to my job. I got to pay my rent, pay my mortgage, keep my car full of gas. I don't have time to think about this. So most people just focus on other things and drink heavily anyway. So, or turn to other drugs. Yeah. That's what most people do. So it's kind of the same. Most people are just going to keep doing that.
Do you know much about Pine Gap in Australia?
I don't really know much about it.
Okay.
So I don't know that there's any questions that I can answer about it. I know that it's a facility there and there's probably some shenanigans, but some stuff that I've heard, but it's nothing I've never asked for a briefing on it. So not much I know about that.
Our Area 51.
Right.
I would say.
That much I know. That much I've heard.
Okay. Yeah. Did you know of Duncan Robert O'Finian?
I know Duncan. Yeah, I haven't spoken to him in a really, really long time, but I do know him. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And did you actually meet Corey Good when you were in your deployment?
Never.
Okay. And this is a really strange question from someone. Do animals have souls and are they recycled when they die? I don't know if you can.
Yeah, as far as we understand, pretty much everything does. Everything has a soul and everything recycles when it dies. As far as we understand, the metaphysics of the universe from species who seem to know that better than we do. Yeah, pretty much everything, including plant life. So,
would it be more of a collective soul, like a group soul?
It depends. It depends on the species or on the. But it's not necessarily. We're all sort of part of, soul collectives and soul families as well. So in a way, we're like that, but in a way, we're still individualized. So it's complicated. I don't know how I'd answer that question, except sort of.
Okay.
Again, like that's a longer lecture on metaphysics that takes longer than a few minutes to explain, but pretty much.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's all the questions that I have. Is there anything you'd really like to say or talk about?
Not off the top of my head necessarily. So I often let people queue with questions if they want to know specific things, they want to talk about certain things. I don't necessarily enjoy just talking about my deployment or talking about my service. So it's not something I'm want to pontificate about. When I do talks and lectures, sometimes I will spend some time talking about intergalactic trade and, you know, sort of what we are going through in our current manufacturing process to sell products and things to the rest of the galaxy, which is a fun topic. But, you know, that's something I can go on about for quite a long time. So it's not really something to say, you know, in 2 seconds about, other than when we get past some of these information and travel embargoes, we will get to all participate in a larger trade process that involves, you know, both sending and receiving products and things to the intergalactic community at large, which will pretty much spawn a golden age on planet Earth that we've never seen before, of commercial wealth that will make a lot of the economy problems that we see around the world disappear, because we will be manufacturing and selling things to many, many different planets, and we'll be buying a lot less than we'll be selling to people. So the trade balance will actually work heavily in our favor, which is something that sometimes, you know, countries have a difficult time sorting out, trade imbalances. But in that particular case, because it'll be planetary, we'll be on the heavy end of the receiving, and, you know, people love to buy our stuff. We make great stuff. So, you know, we'll be doing very, very well, especially brewers and vintners, because they love our beer and they love our wine.
Right. Yeah, we make good
And
wine.
all the defense contractors will be making more money, because we also sell military hardware to everybody, because, again, we make better stuff. So it'll be a giant shot in the arm for the next, you know, couple thousand years or something. It'll be pretty cool.
So does that mean ETs will be walking around us like more visibly?
Oh yeah, once the travel embargo is lifted, oh yeah, we'll allow a certain amount of extraterrestrials to come and visit and do tourism and hang out in our restaurants and our bars and take pictures of themselves by the Grand Canyon like we do, and stuff like that. So, oh yeah, absolutely.
Is it going to be like Star Wars?
Yeah, I mean, and that's in the sense of that we're just going to be living in a place where it's not even going to be about bumping into people of different human colors and racial distinctions. We're going to be bumping into people of, you know, with different furriness and scaliness and all kinds of different eyeballs and things. Yeah, it'll get pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of suspect that a lot of the petty racism that we experience will be replaced by people who will decide that they want to hate other species more because they're more different. So there's always going to be haters, and there's always going to be people who are xenophobic, and they're always going to have names for people. And, you know, every ET who comes here isn't going to be loved by everyone. So there's always going to be haters and name callers and, you know, interspecies bigots. You know, it's nothing we're going to get rid of this century.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe you know, talk a bit more about your psionics, like your psionics workshop. What bit of an overview of what you teach, what people can get out of it?
Again, it's a more complicated operating system than I can give in a short overview. But what I can say about it is that we teach tried and true techniques that can teach people how to rewire their brains, rewire their genetic codes. And if you can rewire your brain and your genetic code, then you can rewire your brain and your body to do anything. And I mean anything. And the results that we have seen from our personnel who have been practicing and developing these techniques in some cases for decades are exhibiting incredible superhuman abilities. Incredible.
Right. Would they be willing to give a testimonial? or they want you
Oh,
to
absolutely not, because
Yeah.
they're under the same secrecy oath stack that my brigadier general is. So that's why
Okay.
I get to do this job and they don't.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but I will say this, the last 4 classes that I had, I taught my students the same telekinesis techniques that I'm relearning and practicing. And I
Yeah.
had 100% of my students who could replicate the technique.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
So I've had a 100% success rate with my students teaching them how to do it. Now,
Wow.
if they don't practice every day, they're
Yeah.
not going to keep it. They're not going to exercise that muscle. But if they practice every day, they can eventually, lift bowling balls or whatever they, whatever their goal is.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Joyce. I appreciate it.
That's all right. Thank you so much, Randy, for
Thanks
the
for going to
interview.
bat for me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.